Bill Salus, I thought of you when I saw everything going on in Syria. I was like, I have to contact you to find out what your take is, because everyone is talking about Damascus, but it looks like the chess pieces have changed, because they say that Iran is weakened, but I want to know how all of this is related to Isaiah 17 war and Jeremiah 49 and Psalm 83. I mean, there seems to be new alignments, and people are asking, is this speeding up or slowing down Bible prophecy? And also, I mean, you have this amazing book, The Future War Prophecies, the book and the DVD, that explains all the wars that are coming up. But what is your take, and can you explain what went on with Syria?
You make a good point, Janie. I think we do still need to be watching for those prophecies you talked about in Isaiah 17, Jeremiah 49, verses 23 through 27. Hopefully we can go over that. Psalm 83, there was also a prophecy about Assyria, which at the time when it was written would include northern Syria, so we had to factor that into unfulfilled. So there appears to be at least three more prophecies unfulfilled dealing with Syria. Now, the question is, what regime is going to be in charge when these prophecies find fulfillment? You know, for the longest time, I've been thinking the Assad regime would be in charge when Damascus gets destroyed, but now that's changed dramatically now that he's fled to Russia. But Iran, of course, is very vulnerable now. Their tentacles have been cut off pretty bad, with Hamas being almost decimated. The Hezbollah is severely damaged. The Assad regime has been toppled. Iran is becoming very desperate now in light of several things. One is Trump's becoming the president, and he's already looking at the potential for preemptive nuclear attacks on their nuclear program. Israel's has attacked Iran, and Iran is very vulnerable now because their missile defense systems have been taken down in that last attack by Israel. I wouldn't even be surprised if the people of Iran start to get encouraged by what they're seeing in Syria and start to do an uprising themselves, because they're not happy with the regime change that's going on over there. They're not happy with the regime that's in existence in Iran presently. Also, the other thing, too, is that Iran has increased their enrichment of their nuclear weapons program dramatically, and they're just a few weeks away from having a nuclear weapon. Some of us actually believe that they may already have 3 to 5 explosive-ready nuclear weapons already. So all the dynamics are changing now, especially with Trump coming into office, Janie.
But also, with Israel, how are they, attacking Syria so boldly with, trying to get rid of their chemical weapons? I mean, I know that they have to do that, but I'm like, is Syria going to attack them? And then with Israel taking over the other half of Mount Hermon, I mean, a lot of things have changed.
Well, the motivation that Israel has is it's in a war path presently. They feel they're very concerned about what's transpiring over there with the new bad actors. This HTS, their leader, is a former Al Qaeda guy, so they're no better than the Assad regime. It is interesting though, because what they did do, they moved in and expanded territorially into not only the Golan Heights, but east of the Golan Heights slightly into a buffer zone, which was called the separation area from the war between Syria and Israel and Yom Kippur. But now that the Syrian regime is gone, Israel feels justified they can go in, and there's no longer another partner there in that agreement back in 1974. They also enlarged their borders into southern Lebanon, and that ceasefire they're moving forward now into southern Lebanon, which tells me two things. One is Israel's defense forces that exist in fulfillment of Bible prophecy are on the move. They're merging into an exceedingly great army in Ezekiel 37:10. Two, they're expanding territorially in fulfillment of other biblical prophecies that Israel will expand territorially into the promised land. We're seeing that find fulfillment. Now, with respect to Israel, they have really no choice. I use the analogy of there's two houses in a neighborhood. On the one hand, there's Israel's house. On the other hand, there's Syria's house. We'll say in house number 2, Syria's house, it's a filthy house. It's infested with rats, plague-stricken rats. Thousands of them now have come and taken over that house. The owners are evacuated. Now, what's Israel to do? Are they going to sit there and wait for those rats to make their move over to Israel's clean house? Or are they going to take out that house? So I use that analogy to simplify it. They're doing what they have to do. They're taking out the weapons that they've destroyed Syria's meager navy. They were not a very big navy, but they destroyed that. They've also destroyed their air force. They've pretty much taken out all their chemical weapons. and their missile defense systems, making it easier for them now to go and attack Iran, by the way, over Syrian airspace. And they haven't had a problem with doing that anyways, because they did that last October when they attacked Iran near the Isfahan area and the missile defense systems and things like that as well.
Now, people, okay, so what's going on with Damascus? I mean, has it weakened Damascus? And some say, is it really Israel that that will destroy? When it talks about Damascus will cease from being a city in Isaiah 17, is it going to be because of Israel attacking it, or will it be a different player?
Well, see, a lot of people think now, because of what's going on that and what had been going on during the Syrian Revolution, that the Damascus prophecy was finding fulfillment because it was really being toppled, as has other cities like Aleppo that look like war zones over there. But you make a good point. We're told in Isaiah 17, 3 very poignant verses. Verse 1 says, the burden against Damascus, behold, Damascus will cease from being a city, and it will be a ruinous heap. It will be reduced to rubble. It will exist no more. This is the oldest continuously inhabited city, dating back to the time as far back as perhaps Abraham, back about 4,000 years ago. It will someday cease to be a city. And some people think, well, this was fulfilled in 732 BC by the Assyrian Empire. But we're told in verse 9, Isaiah 17, verse 9, that in that day his strong cities will be as a forsaken bough and an uppermost branch which they left because of the children of Israel, not the children of Assyria. And there will be desolation. But notice also in that verse, it doesn't just talk about Damascus, it talks about other major cities. His strong cities will be as a forsaken bough. And then we're told, and I'll go over that in just a moment, in a different camera angle of a prophecy in Jeremiah chapter 49, verses 23 through 27. What major cities could we be talking about there? But we're also told that the destruction happens overnight. We're told in Isaiah 17:14, as it concludes, then behold, at eventide trouble, and in the morning he, speaking of Damascus in the masculine pronoun, he is no more. And this is the portion of those who plunder us and a lot of those who rob us, meaning in self-defense, Israel has, and probably the prison rules fight, has to take out this major city to make a statement to decrease the threat. And of course, we were thinking maybe this would be the Assad regime, but now it looks like more and more and more it won't be the Assad regime, but it will happen. Now, the other thing, too, in arguing why this didn't happen in the past historically, when it comes to Assyria or the Assyrian, these terms are mentioned 41 times in Isaiah's 66 chapters, but not once in Isaiah 17, mitigating against that possibility. And also, as I read, verse 9 says it's the children of Israel, not the children of Assyria. Now, when we look at what's interesting here, we go to what cities could we be talking about? Now, if we turn our attention to the other major cities, we go to Jeremiah chapter 49, verses 23 through 27. Where it says against, now this was written probably about 120 years after Isaiah 17, when Jeremiah was prophesying. So if it was destroyed by the Assyrian Empire, of course, it would have to have been rebuilt to fulfill the prophecy I'm about to say. So therefore, that also mitigates against it having already been fulfilled. And by the way, most all of our contemporary colleagues that teach on prophecy agree that this is still an unfulfilled prophecy in Isaiah 17. And this different camera angle here, more details given by Jeremiah. So it says against Damascus. So here we go, it's Damascus. Hamath and Arpad are ashamed. Now, Hamath and Arpad, that would be Homs, and Aleppo would be Arpad. So these are major cities. These are historically as well as today. They're ashamed, for they've heard bad news. They are faint-hearted. There is trouble on the sea, and it cannot be quiet. So let's stop there for a minute. There's trouble on the sea. Okay, well, the sea probably, if we look at this literally, would be the Mediterranean Sea, where Israel has at least 6, maybe more, nuclear-equipped submarines. In fact, from the sea recently, Israel attacked the Syrian Navy just a few days ago, attacked the Syrian Navy from the sea. So we already see precedent now for this type of behavior militarily, Israel's Navy in action. He goes on to say, Damascus has grown feeble. She turns to flee, and fear has seized her. Anguish and sorrows have taken her like a woman in labor. So in other words, the activity on the sea, probably a nuclear weapon of concern, a seas-to-land missile, she turns to flee, and fear has seized her. But then he asks this rhetorical question in verse 25. But why is the city of praise not deserted, the city of my joy? So in other words, Damascus is being deserted. It's going to be destroyed. along with Hamath and Arpad, other major cities, Homs and Aleppo. But why is Jerusalem still the city of God's joy, not deserted? Well, of course, we know God will not abandon Jerusalem, but Damascus is going to be destroyed. And it goes on to say the casualties in verses 26 through 27 of Jeremiah 49. Therefore, her young men shall fall in her streets. That would be civilian casualties. And all the men of war shall be cut off in that day, says the Lord of hosts, meaning their soldiers. So we're looking at, in my estimation, a prophecy unfulfilled, state saying to happen, probably will happen now, but with these new leaders now coming into place. And of course, that whole tide can change too. Who knows, maybe Russia will come back together and start fighting against these guys and try to get Assad reinstated, but that's not likely. One of the reasons that this is going on in Syria presently is because the Assad regime was kept into power during the Syrian Revolution by Iran employing the Hezbollah to help them to fight the rebels. Russia came in around 2015 or 2016 and started bombarding the rebels, bombed the smithereens, and helped Assad stay in power. Iran was also helping them stay in power with their troops as well, and especially with their deployment of Hezbollah. It's interesting now that we talk about this, even today in the news headline, Ayatollah Khomeini was on social media saying, well, really, we're not going to help fight the rebels. It really was Assad's war. The Syrian army should be fighting them. But it's interesting he's saying that because he did try to help them in the past with Hezbollah and with Iranian troops. So it's interesting because now he's saying, well, we're not going to help them. So the likelihood of Assad coming back into power is very minimal. Russia could not stop this because they're involved in the Ukraine. They're bogged down. Hezbollah could not stop this because they've been severely damaged by Israel. Iran can't stop it because they're basically weak because of the concerns with Israel's latest attack on them back in October, where they essentially left Iran naked to self-defense, which is making Iran very desperate for the reasons I talked about. Trump is going to come into power. The people in Iran are probably going to want to revolt, get rid of the regime. And basically Israel has got the ability to now attack their nuclear program, which they certainly have their sights on at this point. So I'm wondering if by January 20th, when Trump takes office, if something doesn't happen more severely, even into Iran, maybe in a preemptive attack on their nuclear sites, Janie.
Okay, so, all right, now can you explain then what you see next happening after, do you think that Damascus will be destroyed soon? I know no one really knows, or tell me the sequence of the different wars.
And this is the dangerous thing because of what's going on. The tides are shifting all the time in the Middle East right now. I really would have thought that the Assad regime would have been in power. It would be a proxy war with Iran's proxies. It would cause Israel to lash out and destroy a city for its existence. And they will do that. But apparently now we don't know who's going to be in charge at the time they do that. And who are those that are robbing and plundering them per se that we just read about in Isaiah 17:14. I was sequencing it as follows. I will still sequence it as follows, but again, it's one thing to speculate as to how these things could happen. It's another thing to simply just quote the prophecies and make sure they're unfulfilled and show how the stage is being set. So that's why I would say that's what my strength is. I know the prophecies, and I know that what I'm talking about is unfulfilled. My research has shown that. But how they're going to sequence, I just don't know. But I will say this. The last major prophecy we saw was back in 1948, the rebirth of the nation of Israel, over 7 decades ago. When the next one finds fulfillment, and the ones that follow in the vacuum of that on its heels, there won't be another 70 years between them. They'll be happening rapidly and sequentially like birth pangs of the end times, like Jesus said in Matthew 24. So I'm looking at the prophecies to start to find fulfillment, and several of them in rapid succession. And how I would see this, the ones I'm looking at, and maybe not in this order, but perhaps, one is the destruction of Damascus, we just read about, and the other major cities of the desolation. 2 is the destruction of Iran's nuclear program and the territory of Elam in Jeremiah chapter 49, verses 34 through 39, which talks about another prophecy dealing with Iran. Iran is the subject of dual prophecies in the end times. One is Ezekiel 38, talks about them as Persia. That's a massive war with Russia, Turkey, Iran, and a coalition of 9, mainly Muslim nations from North Africa and some of the breakaway republics of the former Soviet Union. They're going to invade Israel for plunder and booty. But that's not the prophecy I'm looking at next. The other prophecy, the dual prophecy of Iran, and both in the latter years we're told, being Jeremiah chapter 49, dealing with Elam, ancient Elam. Now Elam, and conversely compared to Persia, if you look at modern day map of Iran, it hugs the Persian Gulf on the west central side of Iran. That prophecy tells us there's going to come a time where the Lord is going to be fiercely angry with the leaders of Iran. I believe that time is now. I believe this is an unfulfilled prophecy. It is in the latter years, we're told. It's the same words used by Ezekiel 38 in the latter years. And they're going to, the Lord's going to be fiercely angry with the leaders there because he says again, he's going to destroy from there the kings and the princes. He would not destroy good leaders. But why? Because he says they're going to launch something lethal somewhere. The Lord's going to break the bow of Elam at the foremost of its might. So Elam territorially has always been separated geographically, isolated from Persia by the Zagros mountain range. And we'll show a map here, a slide of the Elam territory. But basically, several things to be concerned about there. That's where their underground missile silos are, most all of them. They're portable rocket launchers. That's where they have the Bashar nuclear reactor. They also have the Isfahan site there. They also have the Natanz nuclear site there, and the Shiraz. So these are strategic parts of Iran's military, nuclear enrichments, and weapons facilities. They're also in that Elam territory. It's a strategic target. Matter of fact, I think it was in 2019 when Saudi Arabia had been attacked by the Houthis, instructed by Iran, and hit some of their oil facilities and really shut down a lot of Saudi Arabia's oil production for quite some time. Donald Trump was the president at the time, and the Sun newspaper reported that Donald Trump had put a map together of 10 strategic sites to attack in Iran, and included Natanz, Isfahan, and Bushehr nuclear reactors. These are all in the territory of Elam. So the prophecy goes on to say that there'll be a disaster as a result of this Lord's fierce anger, breaking the bow of Elam at the foremost of their might. So breaking the bow would mean their missile launching capabilities. Iran has ballistic missiles. They have hypersonic ballistic missiles that can get to Israel in 400 seconds, which is 6.66 minutes, stationed in this territory at these missile silos. God's not going to allow them to launch a nuclear-equipped, nuclear-tipped weapon at Israel. He's going to break the bow at the foremost of their might. And when this happens, it looks like it's going to create a humanitarian crisis, because it says in the prophecy that the Lord will bring the four winds from the four quarters of heaven. He will scatter the Edomites to all those winds. It says there'll be no nations where the Edomites are not scattered, meaning it's like a worldwide dispersion, likely a humanitarian crisis caused by this disaster. We're told at the time Elam will have enemies, and Iran does have enemies. You've got Israel, the United States now looking at preemptive strikes on their nuclear programs. The Gulf Cooperation Council states of Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman. They're also very concerned about Iran wanting to spread their Shiite caliphate through the Middle East, their tentacles of their hegemony. So that ingredient is already, that detail is already in place as well. And it says that they will be consumed by the sword, meaning military. The sword is a biblical typology for war. So I'm looking at that prophecy. So what order those would be? Jeremiah 49, Elam, Isaiah 17, Damascus. If I took a guess in light of what's going on right now, I'd say the Elam prophecy should be probably first on my radar. We may see by January 20th a preemptive strike on Iran's nuclear programs. Iran's getting desperate because of what's going on. They're basically very vulnerable right now. They're vulnerable to attack not only by America, but also by Israel. Enemies, remember the prophecy says enemies plural. So I'm looking at that, and probably the destruction of Damascus would follow. And there's more, but we'll take a pause right there so everybody can catch their breath, and then we'll talk about what I think's next after those two things.
Well, now, I mean, if the United States is part of going after their weapons in Iran, couldn't Iran then attack the United States?
Well, this is a concern also because over the years, especially with the open borders that we've had with the Biden administration, Hezbollah has had terrorist cells come through into America. In fact, the new leader of Syria is former Al-Qaeda, and Al-Qaeda may also have terrorist cells over here. Would Iran attack America directly. That's a possibility, but it's a bit unlikely in light of the fact that they're showing that they're actually really pretty much weakened by what Israel's already done to their proxies and by their successive attacks in 2024, 2 times into Iran. So I don't necessarily see that as a possibility, but it could be. Could there be internal terror cells acting out? Yes, that could be. That could be to keep America busy with our own homeland. But I don't think they would do that because they know that Trump would lash out and just probably take out the country. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. So, okay, you know, what's interesting, Janie, as we talk about the sequence of events and prophecies, especially Isaiah 17 and the camera angle in Jeremiah 49 about Damascus, we talked about. We don't know, like we said, we don't know who's going to be in power at the time, who's doing the robbing and plundering of Israel at that time. It causes Israel to destroy a city. Probably takes out the city overnight, like we said in Isaiah 17, verses 14. Probably a strategic nuclear attack. Israel has nuclear weapons, and they know how to use a tactical nuclear weapon to take out a city. And they have to be careful when they do that because Israel's right across the border from Syria. And they can't have like a Hiroshima thing with contamination particles and a mushroom cloud. I'm not a physicist, but basically if they did a tactical nuclear weapon at a burst altitude of 45 miles above a city, as I understand this, they could destroy the city. There would still be a mushroom cloud, but it would not suck up all the minerals and contaminate the mushroom cloud, so that Israel then becomes under threat. But whether or not it's the Assad regime, which is not likely, or whether it's these new rebels that are taking charge of HTS, we don't know. But we do have this verse in Isaiah 17:12, verses 13. It says, "Woe to the multitude of many people who make a noise like the roar of the seas, and to the rushing of nations that make a rushing like the rushing of mighty waters. The nations will rush like the rushing of many waters, but God will rebuke them, and they will flee far away and be chased like chaff of the mountains before the wind, like a rolling thing before the whirlwind." So in other words, when they see Damascus get destroyed, they'll be rebuked and they'll flee like chaff of the mountains before the wind. This is also an idiom that comes up in Psalm 83. I'll talk about that in just a moment. So it's not just Syria. It doesn't appear to be from this passage. It's not just the Syrian regime, whatever may be at that time, but it's a rushing of many people, like of nations or a confederacy. Now, I was interpreting this for a while as the proxies of Iran probably would represent this many people, roar of the seas, rushing of nations. But now, in light of the fact that Iran's proxies are pretty much in trouble, and Iran itself is vulnerable, I'm leaning to the possibility that this could actually be dealing with the Psalm 83 scenario. Psalm 83, just for your viewers who are not familiar with it, talks about a Arab confederacy of countries that share common borders with Israel. It was written about 3,000 years ago by Asaph. We're told it was a prophet, 2 Chronicles 29:30. He talked about a time when these countries that share common borders with Israel, will show a map here in just a moment, that include Lebanon, where Hezbollah is, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, Palestinians, Saudi Arabia, the Felicia Gaza area where the Hamas are. We don't know how much longer they'll be there. And then perhaps even Egypt. They're going to come together and form an inner circle confederacy. It says in verses 2-5, they can come together and form a crafty council, a devious plan, to cut the nation of Israel off. The name of Israel will be remembered no more. They want to destroy the Jewish state. It says they form a confederacy. It's a contemporary confederacy, not a chronological ordering of Israel's enemies. Inside of that, we talked about Syria and Iraq. Well, under the banner of Assyria, when Asaph wrote 3,000 years ago, Assyria included northern Syria and northern Iraq. So we would throw Syria in there. So in my estimation, the possibility could loom large now that this multitude of many people who make a roar and tumult on the seas are part of the Psalm 83 Confederacy. And apparently currently Jordan and Egypt have fragile peace treaties with Israel. But in my Future War Prophecies book, I point out that those are going to be gone shortly, that Jordan finds itself in a war and gets defeated by the Israeli Defense Forces in Jeremiah chapter 49, verses 2, and Zephaniah chapter 2, verses 8 and 9. In fact, I'll quote Jeremiah 49:2 for just a moment, because that's another prophecy to be watching for. I think it's related to Psalm 83. Jeremiah 49, verse 2 says, "There's an alarm of war in Rabbah of the Ammonites." That would be Amman, Jordan, the capital of Jordan. So there'll be an alarm of war. and it will become a desolate mound. Sounds much like what happens to Damascus. It says Israel will then take possession of its inheritance. And Jordan is part of the promised land between the river of Egypt, probably the Nile, and the great river Euphrates, which courses through modern-day Syria and Iraq. Genesis 15:18, we're told that that's the promised land that God gave to Abraham. Now, they're going to expand territorially into Jordan. There's other prophecies that point that out. Therefore, there will be a war, not a peace with Jordan. And Jordan is part of Psalm 83 under the banner of the Ammonites, Moabites, and Edomites, which would be Ammonites would be northern Jordan, Moabites would be central Jordan, and Edomites would be southern Jordan. So Jordan is clearly involved. They're going to be defeated. Now, Israel is going to expand territorially. We're already seeing they're doing that. They're expanding into Syria. They're ultimately in Obadiah chapter 1 going to expand even to southern Lebanon into a place called Zarephath, which is just between Tyre and Sidon, the coastal cities. We already see Israel moving into Jordan, into Lebanon now as well. So we're starting to see these types of things happening in relationship to biblical, in my estimation, biblical prophecy. Egypt, we're told, will become a fearful in Isaiah chapter 19 of Israel, of the land of Judah will become a terror to it. And ultimately, it says 5 cities in the land of Egypt will speak the language of Canaan. That's Isaiah 19 verses 18. That would be Hebrew. So Egypt's that treaty's going to go away as well. Israel's going to win a war, and Egypt seems to be also involved in Psalm 83. So we have Syria involved in Isaiah 17, Jeremiah 49 verses 23 through 27, and Psalm 83. In all cases, it's a war scenario, and Syria gets hurt. Damascus gets destroyed.
Okay, now, did you want to talk about the increased danger to Israel?
Well, the increased danger to Israel is one of the reasons they're concerned, and they're taking out Syria's military, navy, weapons depots, chemical weapons. Syria used chemical weapons against their own people in the Syrian Revolution. NPR reported they used them over 300 times. In fact, the first time they used them, I can't remember the times, I think it was around 2013, I could be wrong. The Israelis panicked. They're sending in block-long lines trying to get gas masks because they thought, that's going to come upon them. So Syria's always been concerned about, Israel's always been concerned about Syria's chemical weapons. And of course, that's why they're on the move right now to get rid of them.
Okay, now, I mean, because I'm not an expert like you, but I thought that Iran was supplying a lot of these weapons. So if they are weakened, how is Syria getting all these weapons?
Well, they're not getting them anymore. And the ones they already have are being destroyed. Iran made a colossal mistake in their proxy war. It's not coming back to bite them. This has all been orchestrated in, I believe, a multi-phase, multifaceted plan that Iran had for its proxies, meaning Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis down below Yemen, Syria with the Bashar al-Assad regime, the Shia militias in Iraq, the Islamic Jihad in the West Bank, which, by the way, that's of concern also. Matter of fact, Israel recently got approved a couple of weeks ago, as we speak, to build a border wall between Jordan and Israel, another wall, a big fence, with high-tech technologies, because they're concerned about Iran now getting weapons through Jordan into the Palestinians in the West Bank. So that's another dynamic to be watching for. But the colossal mistake they made, in my estimation, was they had a Moscow on October 7th, and that massacre occurred, that war they did. And then on October 8th, they had Hezbollah get involved in that war to support Hamas. The problem they had with that is that they thought, okay, what we'll do is we'll keep Syria out of the fray. We won't hit them with full throttle with all of our forces and all of our missiles, which Israel was prepared for. Israel was prepared for thousands of missiles to come in all at one time. We'll show a report here that Israel was prepared for Hezbollah alone to send 6,000 missiles a day into Israel over the first few days, and then 2,000 missiles in the second wave that are effective, that would get past the Iron Dome and not land indiscriminately, but actually hit their targets in Tel Aviv and Haifa. They're expecting day-long blackouts, hundreds dead, thousands wounded, etc. But that didn't happen, and I think that was a mistake on Iran's part. Thank God it didn't happen, but it was a mistake on Iran's part. So what they did was they had Hezbollah get involved, and the goal there appears to be they wanted to get Israel diverted from Hamas to the south up to the north with their troops, which they did. Also to create evacuations in the area of the north, which they did. About 60,000, 80,000 still evacuated people in the north of Israelis living as refugees in their own country. They wanted to deplete the Iron Dome system, which they did. Iran, each Iron Dome missile that gets shot costs Israel about $50,000 just for one Iron Dome missile, and they shot out thousands of those to protect the country. They need to replenish that supply. They also wanted to enable the drag on Israel's tourism and their economy, which has been severely hurt. You see any images or videos of the old city right now is basically a ghost town. All the shops are pretty much shut down. A few people are surviving and happy to get one sale every 2 weeks now in the old city. Also, they give time for Iran to build its nuclear program stronger, which they have done. They've been enriching nuclear weapons for that period of time. But they did not get, and also for the world to become more anti-Semitic, which we saw that happening as well with respect to the colleges in America, etc. But they did not have Syria get involved, which they could have done with their chemical weapons. But Syria provided them a corridor because they had to continue to supply weapons to Hezbollah, which was using them in a war against Israel. Now, Hezbollah, we were told in October 2023 by the Jerusalem Post, they estimated they had 200,000 missiles, some of those high-precision guided missiles. Now, as of October 7th of 2024, we find out that Hezbollah launched over 14,000 attacks, missile attacks into Israel, which would take them down to a supply of, if Jerusalem Post is correct, of 186,000 missiles. But then since Israel's been engaged in a full-on war with Hezbollah, Israel says they've taken out about 70% of Hezbollah's weapons, missiles, which would still leave Hezbollah with about 50,000 missiles. They were lobbing about 40 missiles a day, about 1,200 missiles a month into Israel. But could you imagine if that was happening in New Jersey, which Israel's about the size of New Jersey, 40 missiles a day coming into New Jersey from enemies?
No, I can't. Now, the question is, Bill, with Trump coming back in, will that speed up Bible prophecy? Will that slow Bible prophecy? What do you think of these wars coming to pass?
Well, my particular opinion is it's going to speed everything up. As a matter of fact, January 20th is going to be, between now and January 20th, is going to be a very important time window to be watching for, because already Trump is now looking with his advisors at preemptive strikes. This is on the Wall Street Journal even today. What should we do about a preemptive strike of Iran's nuclear program? Grossi, the leader of the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Association, has come out several times, and even most recently saying Iran is dangerously close with its enrichment of having a nuclear weapon. Now, like I said earlier, I think some of us already think they already have that, and they've been waiting to use it. Now, they attacked. The interesting thing is that their multifaceted plan would start with Hamas and then Hezbollah, and of course the Houthis got involved. They're trying to affect maritime commerce in the Red Sea. Houthis have also allowed ballistic missiles at Israel. Syria did not get involved because it was a corridor for Iran to get weapons to Hezbollah. But what happened with Israel, they became so successful, they started taking out all the chain of command and leaders of Hezbollah, and ultimately they took out the leader of Hamas in Tehran, Haniyeh. And Iran found itself at a point where it had to personally attack Israel, which it did. So there were 320 missiles earlier in 2024, which about 99% of those were intercepted. So they realized, hey, listen, we're not as strong as we think. Israel's got protection. Of course, the United States helped intercept some of those. Even Jordan, on a small scale, helped intercept some because they were coming across Jordanian airspace. So basically, Iran now at that point is, you got to be cautious, realizing that Israel is stronger than they thought, and their defense systems are better than they thought. So we got all this dynamics going on. In my estimation, with Trump becoming the president, with his cabinet he's appointing, with Mike Huckabee, for instance, who will not acknowledge, he's never used the term West Bank. He refers to it, the biblical heartland of Judea and Samaria. Senator Tom Cotton is trying to put legislation together that will no longer call the West Bank, but call Judea and Samaria. So we got all these dynamics going in Israel's favor. Trump, of course, was the most pro-Israel president in Israel's history. He recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, moved the embassy there. He recognized the Golan Heights was sovereign to Israel. He got out of the Iran nuclear deal. in 2018, which was one of his campaign promises. So his history, his precedent with Israel is very strong. When he won the election, shortly thereafter, Netanyahu and Trump had 3 conversations, and the news headline came out and said they're on the same page. Well, what does that mean, on the same page? The same page with Iran's nuclear program, probably, for one. Israel's always said that Iran will never get a nuclear weapon. And the new Minister of Defense, Katz, came out after the last attack by Israel, where they shut down the missile defense system, the S-300 missile defense system with Iran, shortly said thereafter, now is the perfect time to strike Iran's nuclear facilities. So like I said, I think Jeremiah chapter 49, with Iran dealing with Elam, now with Trump in motion to become the president, and Iran essentially vulnerable, Syria is gone, Israel can fly over Syrian airspace. I would not be surprised to see a couple of things happen. I would not be surprised to see a preemptive strike, at least by Israel, maybe concerted with America, on Iran's nuclear program. I would not be surprised to see an uprising inside of Iran with its people, trying to get rid of the regime because they're seeing what's going on in Syria. So these things are all on the table right now to be watching for.
Bill, I really am excited about your book, The Future War Prophecies, and the DVD. And the DVD, it looks like a movie. I mean, the quality is incredible. We'll show like some footage in the background. That's an amazing series in itself. And it's very important to me because I got saved through Bible prophecy. And so when people are seeing what's going on in the Middle East, and unsaved people, you need to get these materials, put it in their hands, because it'll open their eyes that all of this was predicted thousands of years ago. And I mean, to me, that's an amazing way to get unsaved loved ones to open up their eyes and accept the Lord. But there's a lot of Christians out there who are not studying Bible prophecy. Bill has done so much research on the different wars that are throughout Scripture. You've done it more than I've seen anybody else, and it's just in this series, it's so amazing because you talk about the locations of the battlefields, you identify the participants, you explain the motives and the outcomes of all these different wars. It's an amazing series, Bill, and we'll have in the link how to get the book and the DVD, or if you're wanting to get them alone. Anything else you want to say about the series?
Well, yeah, thank you for that, Janie. The book is very powerful, and it's written in a way that's easy to understand by even the layman. I did that intentionally because we're going to be entering into a war-torn world, and these are dealing with all the war prophecies that have not been fulfilled yet. So there's a lot of prophecies that have not been found fulfillment yet. They're stage setting, and we'll find fulfillment on between now and even into the tribulation, etc. But these are just specifically dealing with the wars, the future wars that have not found fulfillment, including the ones we've been talking about in this program, which Hamas and Hezbollah, etc. And it's interesting because after the October 7th attack with Hamas, and they follow up the next day on October 8th with Hezbollah, the Future War Prophecies book shot up to number 1 on Amazon and Eschatology on Kindle for 2 months and sat there because it was dealing specifically with these types of relevant and timely topics. But it also covers not just the Middle East, so it gets into the wars of the tribulation, the war between the 10 kings and the harlot, the war between the Michael and the archangel and Satan in the mid part of the tribulation, the war with the seals, the fiery red horsemen of the apocalypse, the second horseman. What about the fourth horseman that has authority over a quarter of the earth to kill mankind? What about the trumpet judgment wars where the demonic forces, a 200 million man demonic army, kills a third of mankind? So I get into all those wars. There's about, I think it's 13 or 14 wars. Very important information. Of course, I don't personally believe that we'll be there for all these wars, because I actually believe Jesus will come to get his bride before the tribulation period. But we could be here to see Ezekiel 38, which we didn't spend much time on today, but that's the prophecy that's coming, I believe, after Psalm 83, after Jeremiah 49, after Damascus, Isaiah 17. We might be here to see those, we don't know, but those are, in my estimation, are pre-tribulation wars. As I do put the rapture is probably a pre-tribulation event too, because the wrath of God comes out in the tribulation period, and we're told we're not appointed to the wrath, where Jesus will deliver us from that wrath. We're not appointed to the hour of trial that tests the whole earth in Revelation chapter 3, tribulation period. We're told to comfort one another with these words. So we could be here to see these wars we're talking about, but I don't believe we would be here to see all the other wars. But the reason the other wars are important is because we have loved ones who are not saved, Janie, and they would get left behind in a pre-trib rapture event to face these kind of wars. So we wanted to make sure that the book covered these wars so that they could be prepared for what's coming, our loved ones who get left behind.
Right. So, whether people believe in pre-trib and post-trib, in the comments, I'm not looking for an argument. The bottom line is that Jesus is coming back very soon, and he loves everyone, and he wants everyone to know him personally. Any last word, Bill?
No, I think that's well said. I mean, there's those different views. Pre-trib, he could come before the tribulation. Mid-trib, he could come in the middle. Post-trib, he could come at the end. Pan-trib, it'll all just pan out. I like what Chuck Missler, former great prophecy teacher, Dr. Chuck Missler, said. He's now gone on to be with the Lord. He says to the post-tribbers and mid-tribbers, he says, don't worry, we'll just explain it to you on the way up. Kind of humorous note. And we'll end on a humorous note. But again, we don't want to be divisive here. It's not a salvation issue. I personally am a pre-trib rapture believer, but the bottom line is that we have hope in Jesus Christ. The world is becoming war-torn. That's what the Future War Prophecies book points out. But we have hope in Jesus Christ, who will be returning shortly.